Xu Qing spent the whole day looking for a job, but despite his efforts he failed to integrate anywhere. He was refused again and again for various reasons. The guy had just recently graduated from university and was looking for opportunities to provide for himself, but it's even harder than it looks. After all, in most cases experienced workers are needed. Today his mood was not entirely positive. Because of this, the bad luck of the day was emphasized by heavy rain, bringing sadness. With quick steps he passes by a crowd of people with different umbrellas which, unlike from him, they are ready for a change of weather. And taking one last look at the grey cloudless sky, they begin to climb the stairs. All wet and tired, he meets an unknown girl among the stone walls. She's staring at him in surprise, but resolutely, with her pair of light brown eyes preparing for an attack. Apparently the hand tightly gripped the handle of the instrument, and you could immediately tell that the stranger was not friendly, or she was afraid of something. Xu Qing feels scared because he did not immediately notice the figure in front of him. He stumbles back and accidentally drops the house keys, which falls silently on his shoes. After a second he realizes that there is nothing to be afraid of, and it's just a person, and exhales with relief. He bends down to pick up the fallen keys, thinking that he just met a cosplayer. The guy immediately notices in his thoughts how well the stranger did her job. The sword and straw shoes look very realistic. She seems to him devoted to her work, but they do not engage in further dialogue, and a guy passes by indifferently. When Xu Qing approaches the door of his apartment, the girl from behind asks him to stop. The young man turns around, notices that she is even further away. She recoiled from him and looks too scared, pressing into the hard surface behind her. He even gets embarrassed. Is he really so untrustworthy? Does he look like a bad guy? With the words that this is his house, the young man slams the front door, noticing that the girl is still standing pressed in the corner. Finally Xu Qing takes a refreshing shower and opens the refrigerator in high spirits. The hand reaches for a cold bottle of beer, and the guy decides for himself that the dreary day is saved. With a characteristic sound he opens a tin can and enjoys a speedy pleasure. It didn't work out with a good day, so his evening is not bad. Before that he feeds his fat, red-haired cat Takeoff, who has already reminded himself of his presence, sitting on the couch sipping a drink, and notices that the rain outside the window has not subsided. Big drops are running down the glass, and the sky is darker than usual. The guy remembers about the stranger on the stairs and goes to the door holding an umbrella in his hand just in case. He looks through the people without noticing anyone. He opens the door, but immediately runs into the same girl. She's back. She looks at him carefully and attentively, frowning. Xu Qing immediately begins to say that she needs to return home, or relatives can help her do it. A little confused but not silent, the girl ignores his words and asks where she is and who this guy is. A direct question, handing her an umbrella. The young man thinks about helping her as soon as possible. After all, otherwise why is she still in this stairwell? Any problems? The stranger claims that she was a member of the Yan gang and does not know how she ended up in this place. Xu Qing decides what she faces. She gets sick and invites her to her house, intending to ask the guard to deal with her. He thinks that she got used to the role and in fact just got lost or has no way to get home. He dials the phone number of Uncle Cho, the same guard, but as soon as he is about to explain the situation he hears a loud and sharp noise. He immediately turns to look at him and sees that his guest has plunged her sword right into his TV screen in the living room. There was a strong anger in her eyes, and his confusion and misunderstanding of what is happening. The girl glances at the guy who is already completing dialogue, having changed his mind about reporting it. They are standing alone in an empty room. Xu Qing looks very confused and cautiously asks the girl where she is from. Now the question is more relevant than before. Beads of sweat from excitement appear on his face. Of course, after all, just in his apartment a strange girl with a sword pierced his expensive TV in the living room, which apparently will not even be able to pay. She sincerely asks without understanding how people got out of there, and Xu Qing begins to suspect. He even seems to deny it himself that she may not be from the past, but her behavior and words speak for themselves. Admits the possibility that the stranger is just an acrobat from the Wukyo troupe, but immediately realizes that her clothes are not like the ones they wear. The stranger is still glowering at him, gripping her sword tightly. Xu Qing now has no doubt that the weapon in her hands is real when she can see it better. Yes, and a fake sword would punch the TV. The guy repeats his question again, and only now hears the answer. He probably could convince a stranger that there is no danger, and she can tell. She gets her name. Jiang He, a student of the salty grouping. The girl looks sad already and there is no shadow of anchor left. She is drawn home to her homeland. That's all he's thinking about right now in general all day most likely, but this information doesn't really help the case. What is the salty grouping? Xu Qing informs them that they are in the Yongqing district of Yangjing City, but this also does not help the figure in front of him to understand at least something. It's like this is the first time she hears these names. The guy takes his head as if this gesture helps him think better, and indeed he decides to go the other way and find out the emperor under whom this person lived. As soon as the girl hears a familiar word, hope flares up in her eyes. She's so small but strong, excitedly decides that the young man is familiar with his highness. Then the guy asks questions, and in the process of the small but difficult dialogue, Xu Qing learns that the stranger thinks they are supposedly in the 16th year of Kawen. She declares it so confidently and simply that he does not decide to consider her crazy counts, which tells the pure truth. And why would she lie? It's not so good to get used to the role of an ancient person. Confused, he finds information on this on the internet, which the girl only looks at incomprehensibly and waits for his further actions. What kind of device is in her hand she also does not understand. After several unsuccessful attempts to list various emperors, Xu Qing guesses with the name of his highness and then a stranger. It seems to come to life when hearing the name of Qinli and Zushi. A relieved smile appears on her face, and the girl does not lose the opportunity to learn at least something about her emperor. Before Xu Qing can answer her, a shout is heard outside the door. The food delivery has arrived. Jiang He reacts instantly to this unexpected sound and runs again to rush with a weapon. The guy has to hurriedly explain to her the harmlessness of the person behind the door. They just deliver the food. The girl makes a note for herself that this is his servant. After all, in her world it would be so, but now she is in a modern and completely does not understand everything you around. Even the courier's words are difficult for her to pronounce and understand. Xu Qing kindly offers to eat together, but she hasn't. He refuses. The question heard after gives understand something. She believes that exiled people are being exiled to this place because everyone around is short-haired. What kind of place should there be to be so different from her surroundings all her life? But the most important thing is that this girl has been wandering the streets of the district alone for an hour. It started to rain. She has a sword in her hands which she undoubtedly skillfully wields. It's scary to imagine what would have happened if she had been more bloodthirsty. Again the offer to eat is refused. The girl turns her head very reluctantly because safety is above all. Is at home with an unknown guy who offers food without explaining what it is. Being away from home in an unknown area, it is difficult to trust someone. After all, her world was much more dangerous. Xu Qing accidentally drops a bottle of soda on the floor. She begins to hiss, audibly releasing gazes. The guy immediately makes excuses, tries to explain that he has not been sent, but already gets a sword point over his head. Fortunately, by Xu Qing meets Jiang He's incredulous and cautious gaze and takes a sip from the jar, some of the contents of which are already spreading on the floor. It shows that it is not poison suitable for consumption. He tries to ingratiate himself into trust to show his safety for her, and partly because he is afraid. However, this is not enough and she is still prudent. The guy with the most friendly face explains that if he had bad intentions, he would not let her into his house but would leave her on the street to freeze. Besides, her sword tricks are clearly unsafe for others, including for him. He adds that his cat is scared by the girl's behavior, probably, which gives him even more innocence. She holds the animal in her hands, caressing it, which catches a slightly incomprehensible look on her. Jiang He is all in his thoughts, still trying to get used to the situation and his position. Xu Qing reflects that there are only three possible scenarios. The first is to leave the girl on the street in the cold and in hunger. Soon the police would have noticed her and arrested her. She just shot him. Left on the street, she's all around, he'll cut it. There will be a lot of crimes on the streets. The second option is to call the law enforcement agencies yourself and hand it over. Like a man from the Tang Dynasty is in the modern world here and now, and he himself will only have a problem. She is not familiar with everything, so you need to teach life in this century. And how quickly will they be considered crazy in this scenario? Or they'll think it's a very stupid joke, but they won't think for a long time because she will wave her sword again. Third, just to observe. An ancient girl fell on his head, located in his. He is skilled in weapons and various martial arts, that's for sure. Xu Qing covers his face with his hands and falls into thought again. Firstly, she does not part with the sword and always takes it out on occasion, and without. Why does the guy feel fear? Which seems logical, right? The young man is beaming when he comes to the conclusion that leaving her on the street would not be the right decision. He'll regret it himself when he finds out about her arrests or something. As a fan of martial arts, Xu Qing even considers the fact that she is an experienced warrior as a reason. It will teach you some new movements in principle. Where can you let a girl with a sword in? There will be some problems. He offers Jiang He fruit again, but now he bites it off himself, showing that it is harmless. The expression on the girl's face betrays her desire to take food. It must have been a long time since I ate. I've been tired since I arrived. She wanted to share, but the guy understands that her body may not accept such food from habit and decides to cook her something more neutral. For example, figure Jiang He is not quite happy with this because she is very hungry and what he offered her looked appetizing. He looks dissatisfied as he finishes the juicy and delicious smelling food. He slaps the sofa, inviting her to sit down next to him and talk. Still incredulously watching Xu Qing, he carefully sits down on the soft surface, preparing to listen carefully. The guy was in his thoughts at the time. There is a desire to photograph this picture. A girl from antiquity sits on the sofa for the first time. This is a sensation. There is a shadow of fright and misunderstanding on her face. Let her not know much, but she understands that the man in front of her, at first he wanted to give her umbrella. She knows what it is, and his room is strange and he eats incomprehensible food. In any case, she needs to be more careful. Jiang He asks hopefully about the location. Xu Qing starts a dialogue from afar, before asking her to put her weapon away, lowering her eyes to the floor. Even with a certain sadness, she says that she will not be able to return home. It's too far from there. To this she asks in surprise about the distance between this and her house in 1200 years. Her eyes are puzzled and he continues, clarifies that all personalities like her emperor lived 1,000 years ago and her friends and relatives, all of them are no longer alive. The girl jumps up in front, recoiling from the guy, incredible fright on the face, misunderstanding of what is happening, denies his words, remaining calm. Xu Qing continues, reminds her of the oddities of everything around her that she had to face, and first of all, that it is necessary to observe the rules of this modern world. Denies it again. She wants to believe that the guy is lying to her. She tries to leave, but Xu Qing immediately jumps up and asks her to wait. From such a sharp movement, the girl instantly he stands in his stance and points a sharp sword at the guy, not allowing him to come closer. He only continues to speak with an impassive face that the rules include a ban on waving a sword in the middle of the street, for which she can get into trouble without moving. She decides to find out from him the reason for his help. The young man replies that when Taikov, his cat, was on the street, he took him to himself, and that's enough. But not the girls. Again, the disbelief on her face. Jiang He frowns but decides for himself that Xu Qing is not a threat to her dangers, just a guy who was coming home and met her. He even handed her an umbrella when it got dark and it was raining, but the interest is still the same because his help may seem strange, and she asks again. Xu Qing honestly admits his interest. It's not every day that you meet a person who arrived from the past, a unique case. The guy is just glowing with happiness from the opportunity to observe such an amazing phenomenon, but his joy is dulled by Jiang He's remark about the murder. His murder. I have to remind you again that everything is here for peace and to hurt, and even more so to kill people. She should not assume that if a girl can find out the reason for her appearance in this world, then she will be able to return. This is what happens according to the classics of the genre. In the meantime, she should get to know this world and follow the rules. First of all, you can't hurt people and break things like she did with his TV. This reminder even makes her feel a little ashamed. Xu Qing declares that she can basically cope alone, wandering the streets of the city if she does not want to do otherwise. Jiang He examines himself and realizes that her clothes are very different from the ones worn by everyone around. She can't get out, and even more so, she doesn't know where to go, just nowhere to go. She is alone in this big and unfamiliar world, or almost alone. Xu Qing only says to put down the sword and is going to order her food. He's taking a risk by keeping the girl. Firstly, no one should see her, and secondly, yourself need to make sure that Jiang He does not cut him in half with her weapon. Reluctantly but confidently, the girl accepts all the words said by the guy and throws her weapon on the floor. Although before I didn't part with it, gives a sign of truth and willingness to obey. After a little thought, she decides what kind of food she will order. Rice and buns, the neutral food that was in her time, offers her to take a bath until the food delivery arrives. While the guy explains everyday things, the girl is more and more surprised by new things and amenities for her. Lets her try to turn on the water, and he stands behind and points the camera. All that he needs to capture a man of antiquity. Sees a shower for the first time, leaves Jiang He is alone and starts looking for her things. The choice, alas, is small. Rummaging in the closet, and that's it. He pulls out a white t-shirt with a picture of a half-naked girl. Not bad, but not that. As a result, he chooses something else. Accidentally enters the bathroom, forgetting that he did not teach her to close the door, and leaving things does. It shows how to use the latch, this time in complete privacy. The girl takes a shower, standing under hot water looking at the shampoo foam, tries it with his tongue. It tastes so. At this time Xu Qing was sprawled on the sofa, still not believing what was happening. He took a girl from antiquity to him, and this is not a dream. Decides to take a look at the sword and appraisingly notices that it is really real. It would be interesting to take it to the appraiser and find out the exact age of the item. Jiang He comes out of the bathroom when the guy writes something on a piece of paper. She's wearing the red sweatshirt he gave her earlier in jeans, all his clothes. She is interested in what Xu Qing is writing there, and he hands her a piece of paper with a list of what she needs to buy, asks to read. The girl can't make out anything, and the guy says that he will deal with her ability to read later. She touches the fabric of the jacket on herself, which she considered strange. In general, the clothes of this time are considered strange. The young man, without much hesitation, compliments Jiang He, but immediately explains under her gaze that it is the norm to compliment people here. Somehow she even smiles awkwardly, to which she receives a strict and clear answer not to flirt with her. He looks down at the floor and sees the girl's shoes, her old straw ones. Well, yes, where would she put them? There's nothing to wear. He asks to remove these sandals and says he will buy new shoes tomorrow. Xu Qing watches the girl's actions and finds himself thinking that he thinks she is very cute, cautious and curious, afraid of everything, just like homeless cats while putting shoes on. Unfortunately, the scream of food delivery is heard in the door, which makes her insanely scared of surprise. Again, I have to explain again. After taking a meal, he puts everything on the table while Jiang He crumples behind his back, sitting already at the table. She remembers the words of her deputy: if a person wants to do something for you, he must be a fraud. She frowns again and he makes an offended grimace, but in the same seconds the girl adds that the guy in front of her is good. The wall clock showed almost 9 o'clock in the evening. Outside the window is still low rain. He sat at a wooden table while the girl ate. As soon as she finished with the meal, the guy started talking, leaning on his fist, whether or not the girl accepted the fact that she lived 1200 years ago. The young man intended to continue the dialogue based on this information. Jiang He looked a little haggard, stupidly staring at the surface of the table, and obediently listens. Xu Qing reminds her again, probably even reassures her that she is completely safe in his house, and even if she decides to kill him, she can live here quietly for a while, about 7 days of safety, until the body stinks badly due to decomposition. Instructively raises his finger up, telling it all with a serious face. He returns to the already broken TV and again asks her not to grab the sword with her without a reason. Explains to the girl what this device is like, making sounds, which is created for safe entertainment, which she took to be a danger. He shows her the phone, showing its purpose, kindly asks to contact him for all questions if she does not understand something. Still standing in the middle of the room looking at the girl, who without distraction listened to him with her hands folded in her lap, exhales, shaking his head. He goes to the window and looks out at the rainy city outside. At the falling drops from the sky, the voice becomes calmer and the face does not express any particular emotions. He claims that everyone is friends outside his house and the situation is safe, but only for him. For a girl, it's dangerous everywhere there. Turns to her when he hears the expected question. Leaving his hand on the glass, she decides to explain by an example that she understands if she were a person who got into the royal palace, she would be put in prison and recognized as an outsider, so she's here superfluous, in the wrong place. He goes to the locker and shows her his identification card, explaining that everyone is given it from birth and needs it. If the police find her and find out that she does not have a card, they will have to follow her to the department for a more thorough conversation. He raises his finger up again, continuing his story with an instructive look: if he decides to harm someone, he will be sent to prison. Moreover, you can't even have a weapon with you. Xu Qing looks away and plunges into thoughts that she can't to appear in public without an identification card, and they should not know about its origin because it will become a worldwide sensation. He is pulled out of his thoughts by the confident voice of the girl opposite, who makes it clear that she has understood everything. He asks if she is considered a refugee, but receives a negative answer, rather like a slave without documents in captivity. Not exactly a positive example, and on the girl's face there are now notes of fright. Xu Qing's tone also changes and he begins to be more serious. In this world she is in a very dangerous position. The guy speaks with his eyes on the floor, admits that I am glad to meet a man born 1200 years ago, an incredible case, and feeling he comes closer and the girl's legs shrink. He wants to help her get used to it, to understand what happened. Jiang He fists his knees in resignation and lowers his head. He doesn't understand how he can trust him. She just wants to go home. Xu Qing doesn't stand on ceremony and immediately says that she can forget about what he said if she doesn't want to trust. If she didn't trust him, he wouldn't be able to protect her and help her. The girl understands that the situation is hopeless helpless, and this is the best option of all. There's nowhere to go anyway, and the guy definitely understands that he is her only salvation. Mentally agrees and asks, raising her head, what she should do. Then the young man positively picks up a sword and first of all says not to draw it anymore. He reminds her again that she can ask him anything, to which the girl opposite turns to the closed door on the side and looks into the guy's eyes again. She asks where his wife is, and Xu Qing awkwardly blunts his eyes, smiling, although he feels a certain embarrassment now. Even throws it off on a woman's instinct to gossip. The girl is also a little embarrassed and says haltingly that this is not very convenient. The guy admits that he has been single for more than 20 years. Single. Jiang He incomprehensibly asks again about the bachelor, apparently not quite understanding. The guy again explains that it is the norm for people of opposite sexes to be alone here. She doesn't have to sleep with him, so he gives her a spare room. The girl carefully picks up her sword and looks around the room that she has shown. This room used to be just a dump for unnecessary things, so it doesn't look the best, no. But Xu Qing promises to clean up soon. Boxes and suitcases with a layer of dust are in the corners in the dark while the young man is sorting out unnecessary things. Jiang He finds this place strange, and the fact that the owner of the house at this age is still not married. She holds her weapon behind her back and shudders when Xu Qing is close, giving her a winter mattress since there is no other one, and asks not to worry because he is clean. He makes her bed linen and tells her to relax in a hospitable way. He understands that she is confused because he is too. Finally, he turns around and introduces himself to her. After wishing good night, he leaves the girl alone in this room and closes the door behind him until she's still standing there watching him. She looks just as confused and scared. She watches him and then sits down on the bed in a dark room, again plunging into her thoughts. It is difficult to accept such drastic changes in life. The rain has already stopped and the streets of the city have become quieter. The moon was visible in the sky, illuminating the guy's room. Xu Qing lies on his bed with his hand under his head and looks at the dark, starry sky outside the window. It's been a tired day, so all he can do is it's stupid to look ahead, not finding anything interesting, and where his gaze is blunted all this time he turns away, plunging into his thoughts. Now he looks directly at the interior of his room. Perhaps, or maybe he doesn't see anything in front of him at all. He ponders what happened to him during the day, refusal to accept a job, failures, rainy weather, and meeting a girl from the past who brandishes a sword. That's a combo. Everything piled up so suddenly that he fell out of reality. He lies on his back again and covers his face with his palm, tirely forcing himself not to think about it, to forget he needs sleep. There are too many thoughts for today. My head is overloaded. He hopes that he dreamed all this, and in the morning there will be nothing in the form of a stranger in a strange outfit. He lies on his side and closes his eyes, trying to fall asleep, and he does it. After a few moments he falls asleep. The guy wakes up from the sun's rays so persistently shining in his face. The blue eyes open and the hand reaches for the mobile phone. The time is displayed on the screen, exactly 10 o'clock in the morning. This helps him to get out of bed more cheerfully because he has been sleeping for so long. Not yet. His eyes widen and he remembers the events of yesterday's sleep. Like a hand removes, he moves cautiously but quickly into the living room and sees her peeking out from behind the wall. Jiang He is sitting on the sofa examining his sword. She can't use anything besides manners. What else can she do? Therefore she patiently did nothing from the moment she woke up and apparently waited for Xu Qing to wake up himself. The guy is watching, hiding around the corner. After all, this is not a dream, fortunately, or the girl noses him and calls softly by name. The young man timidly but with an air of confidence comes out and as it were concludes, not only for himself but out loud, that everything is real, as if nothing had happened. Awkwardly and kindly notices that the guest got up early, smiling. The same one answers him in monosyllables that it is almost new. Awkwardly thinks that there is no point in continuing the dialogue and offers her breakfast. Abruptly the girl remembers something and starts looking for it. She doesn't find it at home. After going through all her clothes she returns to the room under Xu Qing's incomprehensible gaze and gives him 2 small stones gold. The guy's face takes on a predatory look. His fingers gently hold a shiny object, but when the girl is going to give him something else to make sure it's enough, he returns the gold to her. He says that he is not going to take her outside with him and takes her head. Let him keep everything for himself. After that he looks at her more seriously, looking at her with head to toe, his red jacket, blue jeans and slippers. He examines his own clothes on her and says that he will buy basic necessities. Once again he orders you to stay at home and not go out. so that there are no dangers. He stands in front of a slightly fogged mirror in the bathroom, brushes his teeth and looks at his reflection. Then he rinses his mouth and washes his face. I'm definitely awake now. Before that I advise to tie her hair so that it looks like the everyday look of a modern person, not to go out in her ancient clothes. It's good that the police station is nearby across the street, and she's safe as long as she's not acting weird. And this concept is extensible. Everything is strange for her now, that's why her behavior is the same. Carefully selects clothes from the ones offered on hangers in the store, taking several at once. To be sure, he buys a couple of dresses in the pink light on display catches his eye. Barren and his, it seemed cute. Maybe she'll like it too. Although while getting used to modern fashion, the glitter from the underwear department is only more embarrassing. Xu Qing is standing in front of the entrance and dispassionately ponders the complexity of further action. It's not every day you go to the women's departments, especially since he doesn't know her size, but he has nothing else to do. An hour later, Xu Qing leaves the store exhaling wearily. Slouching, he drags the bags and looks at the contents. He blushes a little, noticing they are a box of underwear, but pursing his lips he goes on. On the way he meets a bookstore and enters it. Two large, obviously heavy books are on the counter, and the guy pays for them. Uncertain, she keeps one of them and doubts whether they will be useful to her, but let them be at home anyway. It goes outside, and the busy street of the city catches the eye again. Today is a sunnier day than yesterday. Xu Qing wanders along a road already familiar to him when suddenly a local patrolling policeman calls him well known. Apparently he starts a casual dialogue, and the guy smiles awkwardly when they ask him about the fact that he called yesterday. He interrupts, justifying himself allegedly accidentally dialed the wrong number, and claims that everything is fine. Hurriedly asks if his interlocutor had breakfast in front of Xu Qing, straightens up and listens to the policeman more seriously. He warns that there is a thief in the neighborhood and you need to close windows and doors. The guy takes into account, and then finally goes home where a new one is waiting for him, a friend. As soon as he enters he sees her in front of him. Jiang He, ready to attack, clutches the sword tightly in her hands, and a silent Xu Qing reminds her that it is safe here and not to behave so strangely. When she is on the couch she holds out food and offers to eat. The girl is still a little surprised to watch his actions and what he gives. He says, looking over his shoulder, that he bought her essentials and she can sort them out after eating. Jiang He awkwardly holds the lunch in his hands and gives restrained thanks, his eyes still bulging. The guy turns sharply to her, remembering something. He appears in front of her and with his chest proudly raised, asks why she did not call him young master, clasps his hands together and exhales resolutely, staring at her with his bright eyes. Then Thor's more simply interested in whether he is considered really young, a warrior, or maybe a man or someone else. The girl just looks at him blankly, not knowing how to react, tilts his head sideways and slowly corrects in a questioning tone, thanking him already as a young warrior. The guy closes his eyes and confidently beats his fist on the palm in front of him, content with the way she addressed him. Jiang He looks at him gloomily with an emotion unknown to her, and he's having fun with her, who doesn't understand that this feeling is called trolling. Offers to start eating. Xu Qing looks surprised from the side how aggressive the girl began to eat, quickly emptying the saucer. As a result he puts rice in his mouth and blissfully and calmly chews with her after their plates are empty. Xu Qing says that he bought clothes but does not know their size, so he judges by height it should fit. Awkwardly hands her a dress on hanger and sneakers in a box, adding that they should be much more comfortable than the straw sandals she came in. While he turns away further into the bag, the girl is incomprehensibly holding a bra in her hands, and Xu Qing is embarrassed by this, and faster he shoves her a bag with all her clothes. She says that if she doesn't understand how to put it on she will show her a video. Jiang He again does not understand the new word. The young man ignores her question and in the end gives her a box of underwear, and not even looking in her direction, blushes a little and just gives it all to her to study herself, let her handle it herself. The girl as usual does not understand either what he is holding out to her or why he behaves like this. The last one hands her books on history and science fiction. She doesn't know if it's a good at in plain Chinese, but that's what she'll find out. She thinks it would be worth teaching her how to use a computer so that she can easily learn everything. He notices out of the corner of his eye that Jiang He is yawning. No wonder she was tired. After all, he didn't sleep well that night either. Turns to her sitting at the computer desk and asks if she has any questions, offers to sleep, but the girl ignores it. He is interested in what status Xu Qing has in this world. It is unlikely that she will understand that he is a graduate who will soon become a social worker, but for now he is unemployed, he thinks, scratching his chin. Therefore he gives an example that is more understandable for her case. Is like after an imperial exam but without a job. The girl assumes that he is a rich child but cuts him off because his past is not rich and he does not want to be an official. Jiang He thinks about it and understands it in his own way. maybe he's from a feudal family if he turns back to the book that Xu Qing bought her and sees a page with familiar people, more precisely, in familiar clothes. Tears come to my eyes. The homesickness for the motherland and the people from there again brings. She asks how she can get back. But the answer doesn't change. He doesn't know. How did she get here in the first place? Jiang He says that she chased a thief in a rainy forest. Then I got lost and, wandering around, came across an unfamiliar small house. Xu Qing immediately notes that there are no forests in the area, and it seems strange to him. He tries to keep a positive look and encourages that first you need to survive and then return home. The girl sadly lowered her gaze clearly back in her thoughts. Her attention is drawn to Xu Qing's question. Excitedly asks about her combat skills, military rank. The girl replies without enthusiasm that Yan is considered the strongest in the game. The guy is even bigger. She lights up on this topic and all sparkling clarifies specifically about the technique she owns. He clenches his fists and I have a smile on my face from ear to ear. From what height can she jump? He slowly approaches the window and supposedly says that he can jump from a 4-story height, pointing at him with his finger. The guy sticks to the glass and the eyes just boil out. The 4th floor looks at the girl with burning eyes, clenching his fists, excitedly interested in whether she owns such martial arts as dragon palm, durability technique and heavenly mystical technique. Jiang He only looks at him questioningly, hearing about such names for the first time. Xu Qing was still actively pressuring the girl, already asking about kung fu. The girl takes a step back and breaks off his dreams. He says that he is already too old for this and nothing will work in him even if he tries, but he does not let up and with the same enthusiasm claims that he does not need much, asks only to teach. After a second, he seems to come to his senses and apologizes, assumes that everything is very strict there. He looks away smiling awkwardly. Jiang He tightens up a little but answers him it's not difficult at all and there are only a couple of movements and no skill. In the next moment, he puts his legs wider and prepares to stand up, explaining the process that the first martial arts training is waist training, shows him the movement by passing next to him with his fist. Frowning, he says that martial arts training takes a lot of time and everything depends on the speed of mastering skills. Xu Qing defends himself by covering himself with his palms forward, after connects them to a plea not to train a stand. The look is even sad and this also causes bewilderment in the girl. How can you train movements without a rack? He asks how long it takes to train her, and receiving the answer that is about 3 years, he thinks in surprise and dissatisfaction. He thinks that for a 3-year-long stand he could easily go to the army. It is also useless in his opinion. It will not give a new one. He insists on asking about the technique of fighting with a sword, but even here he is in the gap. His eyes can't keep up with his hands and his hands are behind his eyes. According to the girl, now it looks sadly humiliated and listlessly lowers his earlier a hard fist, turns away and returns to the previous topic. Sends Jiang He to try on clothes. As soon as the door of her room slams shut, the guy takes a predatory glance at the sword lying on the sofa and rushes to it. Takes advantage of the opportunity, he sticks it out and quickly starts waving in front of him with the look of a good and confident warrior, but quickly runs out of steam. He puts it in place, exhaling, standing in front of the bed on his hands and knees. Suddenly he hears a woman's voice from behind and turns around. Jiang He has changed her clothes and is standing in front of him in new clothes, jacket and jeans. She said it was more everything fit. Xu Qing just smiles and claims that there are no problems, asks her to spin around to get a better look. She, trampling with her feet, quickly turns around with a dissatisfied face. The guy remembers that he forgot to buy her hair bands and says that tying them with a strange rope does not correspond to the image and it is better to dissolve them. This is what the girl does. Looking uncertainly at the guy opposite, the young man blushes and closes his eyes. Noticing Jiang He's intelligence and complacence, he covers his face with his hands, restraining his emotions while she stands over him in confusion. He tells her that they will go out in the evening for a walk and need to be reminded about buying hair rubber. An orange sunset shines through the window and the room is filled with it. While the guy is concentrating on the computer, the girl looks out from her room watching with interest. He comes around the corner and asks what he is doing. Xu Qing gets distracted from what he was doing and turns to her. Jiang He wonders what kind of device is in front of him. On the screen she sees a news anchor. He begins to explain that the computer a means of information. We can see things there that are very far away from us. We can see what is happening in other cities, countries and in the whole world. She wonders if the book he he bought is difficult for her. Jiang He replies that's enough, it is difficult for her to read, she does it very slowly. Xu Qing smiles calmly supporting her. She says not to hurry, if he were in her place he wouldn't have done as well. The girl blushes a little at such words, embarrassed, and decides to remain silent. The guy goes back to work and she's still watching from behind. Shouldn't it be working? To this he says that he is doing it now. In this world, in order to work you need to think. The girl understands this in her own way and assumes that the interlocutor is a businessman. Associations and images immediately pop up in my head. Xu Qing turns away and puts his head on his hand, looking at the computer screen. Again she says that this is not quite true and it will be difficult for her to understand everything. First you need to study the history to have at least some idea. She actively leans back and raises her hands in Jiang He has associations in her head with the businessmen of her time again. After the guy asks what is in martial arts girl leader, she immediately readily replies that she is very strong and even gives in forward. She admires him so much. Xu Ten smiles contentedly and hovers the mouse over the screen, including the video clip on it. People in ancient clothes arrange a fight to the music and presumably cut trees with their sword, performing difficult tricks. Jiang He immediately almost imprints her face into the screen and there are lights in her eyes. There is no limit to surprise and admiration. The guy even has to make room when she moves closer. The girl excitedly asks how, and the one with the fire in the eyes gives a counter question whether its leader is so powerful. Both are excited about what is happening, but for different reasons. The girl is sitting on a chair next to the guy, clenching her fists on her knees. Her expression is resolute and focused. The guy looks more emotional and asks with a smile and admiration if they are strong. Jiang He calls them godlike. He crosses his fingers and closes his eyes, imagining his battle with the heroes from the movie. She is pulled out of her dreams by the voice of Xu Qing, who wants to show something else. Girl, he gets distracted and looks at the screen. The man hits with such force that the imprint of his palm and the silhouette of a man in it remain on the ground. This strikes a girl who is all drooping already. She doesn't know what to say and looks at the screen in surprise. The guy animatedly watches her reaction and asks for opinions, but she just slouches gloomily and clarifies whether this is the real strength of modern people. Xu Qing smiles awkwardly and begins to explain that this is all artistic and a representation of how people see it all. The girl leans on him and solemnly asks if this is true. Since the exact answer from she did not hear the chatter of the interlocutor, he starts to deny it again, but not exactly, and Jiang He puts even more pressure on him with the same questions. Under Xu Qing's gaze she awkwardly and fearfully shrinks and now clearly answers that martial arts are not real but films, or decides to show clearly. And now the girl sees in front of her a woman in an outfit that was worn in ancient times. The guy says that this is all what modern people imagine about past generations, and to be precise, this is how they represent imagine masters of martial arts. It is difficult for a girl to understand, but the confidence on her face says that she is striking to do it. Xu Qing covers her face with her hand, smiling weakly, and again says that over time she will understand modern cinema and art. Joyfully asks about the leader Jiang He, and she says that he was about as strong if you don't pay attention to how these people move. The guy moves away from her and poses a strange pose, asking about the inept movements of people on the screen. Jiang He wearily closes his eyes and answers on the way out that the movement's skilled, but usually people focus on one thing. Of all the members of her game, probably only the second miss is capable of such a thing, but she can't do that divine blow with her hand. Xu Qing thinks about it and has an idea, finds a moment where a man waves his hands with incredible speed and wonders if the girl can do it. He clasps his hands together and dreamily repairs move his hands so fast that you can hear the sound and everything blurred in his eyes. Her eyes shine when she thinks about it, just show him, not because he doesn't believe it, but he is very interested in it. Jiang He thinks for a while, then rises from the wooden chair and gaining strength tries to repeat it. The look is confident and the nature of the movement looks masterful. The guy watches admiringly from the side, agreeing with the correctness of the fulfillment of his request. After the demonstration he goes to his room taking his sword. Xu Qing remains standing alone in the room looking at her back. She says that if he wants to learn he can show how to train properly. Smiles half turned, he says this as he returns to the room, and the guy is still alone, fell to his knees looking with admiration at the retreating girl. Then she starts out of the corner of her eye as he eagerly begins to actively jump around the room. He keeps silent and moves on, touching the ball with which the red cat was playing with his foot. She looks down and sees him mewing piteously. He wants to play, but Jiang He silently enters the room, closing the door in front of him. He leans against the door, closing his eyes. He exhales with relief and rolls down a little. He enters into his thoughts that there are no good-natured people and everyone has ulterior motives. This guy, for example, has a desire to learn martial arts. We need to be more careful, the world is dangerous. Images from the movie that Xu Qing showed her come to mind, and she, like a real kitten, trembles in fright. He raises his head and notices that it is quite spacious there. He spreads his legs wide and waves his sword in front of the window so that the curtains fly up. At this time the guy hears some noise from the girl's room but does not dare to go check. She looks displeased that she is not sleeping but doing something like that. He yawns and thinks he could use some sleep too. Fatigue rolled over, falls on the bed face forward and lies down with an asterisk. He looks away and thinks unbelievably, closes his eyes, cheeks turn pink and there's a satisfied smile on his face. A martial arts girl at his house sleeping in the next room. That's real luck. A sharp noise from her room distracts from sweet thoughts. Tasks with a question and Jiang He can study but just falls asleep without paying much attention. Wakes up closer to 7 o'clock. She looks out of the room and decides that it's time to take her new friend outside and show everything. He sits on a chair in the hallway and puts on a pair of sneakers that Xu Qing bought her earlier. He's standing next to me with his arms folded with his eyes closed. He dictates the rules to her in a calm tone. Do not talk, just look and listen. Ask all questions on returning home. Do not run fast, do not jump high, and generally behave it's not as strange as possible. More actively asks if she understood, proudly standing in a pose. He likes to feel like a leader and a teacher in some way. She agrees and looks at him. It's even kind of pitiful and cute. And Xu Qing takes out his cell phone, points the camera at her, and takes pictures. In the photo Jiang He looks too serious, emotionless, impassive. She notices his reaction and asks what's the matter. He just smiled at her, even showing her how to do it for persuasiveness. In response the girl reluctantly twists her mouth in a semblance of a smile, frowning her eyebrows. The guy finds it frightening, awkwardly notices that her facial expression will scare everything away and just simply don't make unnecessary movements. It's a normal walk, it's safe outside. The girl listens, clutching her sword. When he just put it down he walks away in fright, not wanting to part with his weapon. In her world it was the norm to walk with a sword, moreover it was mandatory. Xu Qing takes hold of his head, awkwardly explaining that outside the house there are weaklings like him. Despite his height she can calmly with one blow. The girl squeezes her the fist on which the veins are visible and looks at him. Apparently she does not doubt his words, turns away and says she understood him, and so keen without losing the opportunity. And a good shot, points the camera at her again. This time the photo turns out better. At the questioning look of the girl he only encourages her to go out and finally go for a walk with her hands folded on her sides. The sun is already setting over the horizon, everything is turning yellow. Xu Qing goes out first, confidently striding forward through familiar places. Jiang He is hiding somewhere behind a wall, carefully watching everything, just like a wild kitten in an area unknown to him, while the guy explains everything around her, namely that they live in the neighborhood and around the apartment building. The girl looks around with interest, not losing sight of anything. One causes misunderstanding, the other causes even more misunderstanding. He points his finger at the drogant and the entrance, explaining everything along the way about food and clothing stores and other things. A delivery man rides by on a moped and Jiang He is frightened by an unfamiliar thing and a loud sound. The guy immediately calms her down. He walks next to me and does not understand. We could have thought of bringing a girl out of the past into the light if not him. And she walks next to me and carefully looks around, examines everything. The couple notices a local policeman and an haunt ahead. As soon as they get closer the woman recognizes Jiang He and immediately notifies about it. The dark-haired girl also understands where they met and frowns. Xu Qing immediately takes control of the situation and hides it behind his back. The policeman asks if it's his girlfriend but the guy denies it, saying it's just a girlfriend. Meanwhile his girlfriend is hiding behind him in confusion, watching everything, and he remembers where she saw a stranger next to Xu Qing yesterday. I was standing in the corridor with a sword and he looked so suspicious, disapproving. A man in uniform clarifies about the sword and she clearly shows its size. At this time Jiang He presses into the guy, hiding even more behind his back. He is also surprised and a little confused, but he thinks quickly and actively explains that it was a cosplay. He tries to look convincing, gestures with his hands. Under the slightly surprised look of the elders they begin to explain what cosplay is, that this is a fashionable subculture that they don't understand. She appears and remembers how her grandson took photos in which she was dressed up like a zombie. The man frowns, uncomprehendingly asking about it. The older generation really does not understand why young people dress up in all sorts of monsters. And not only seizing the moment, Xu Qing takes the girl by the hand and leads her forward. He says goodbye to the adults, insistently leaving Jiang He behind him. Under the distracted gaze of his companion he tells his aunt that it's time to cook dinner and moves away. Adults only look at their back, saying that young people have fewer ways to have fun now. now. As soon as they move away to a sufficient distance, the girl pulls out her hand. Xu Qing turns to her and starts the dialogue first. She asks if that aunt saw her yesterday. Jiang He lowers his head, looks at before and is silent. Despite her silence, he suggests that she stumbled upon her but decided not to talk again with a raised finger and an awkward look. Then she returns to the road and walks forward, thinking that if it was another person who saw her yesterday it would be bad. A car drives by and the girl watches her movement with interest, notices that what she saw is fast enough, and Company King starts explaining what it is. She translates it again into a language she understands: a carriage with horses, but without horses. Jiang He immediately embodies the image of a horse and a car in his head and is surprised by such strange things. Then the guy points to the all-seeing eye on the pillar and also tells her what this device is, looming over her intimidating look and gesture, saying that someone somewhere is watching them through this eye, and he manages to scare her. Jiang He turns around silently. Xu Qing is fluent, explains that there is nothing to be afraid of and no one is watching at the moment. This will only be needed if something happens, but the girl does not listen and picks up stones from the flower bed. He doesn't understand why she takes it, but when she starts aiming he understands her intention, stops and covers his face with his hand, exhaling, asks to put the stones in place. The couple passes at the intersection where there are not so many people in the evening. Xu Qing crosses his arms over his chest, points his head at things around and explains everything to the girl walking next to him. At the traffic light you can only pass on the green color, otherwise you will be punished, and the danger will not only you but also the drivers on the road. He explains it just like a small child in elementary school. They pass along the white stripes. A girl with an intern looks at the stopped cars. As soon as the street lamp turns on he raises his head up in surprise, lags behind Xu Qing looking at the shops as they pass by them. Looking haggard he turns around at every sound, at every car. He gets scared when a small dog appears from behind, barking very loudly, even preparing to defend against surprise. The guy is interested in how she likes what he is holding out, that is elastic bands. As soon as he sees her face he imagines her with this rubber with bells and changes his mind. Not that at all. He squeezes it in his palm and starts looking for another one. Thoughtfully looks at the jewelry stand while Jiang He looks out from behind and also sees all the beauty in front of them. Her eyes burn when she sees so many beautiful earrings and rings of different colors and shapes. The guy puts a rubber band with blue butterflies in her hand. This one is already better than the last one. The girl stretches it, trying to figure out how to use it. Xu Qing is only awkward, watching her and waiting for her to figure it out herself. Finally she understands what to do with it and ties her hair in a ponytail. The guy turns around to look at her and just claims to himself that this elastic band suits her. It's getting really dark outside and there's no yellow sunset. They go into a diner and Xu Qing orders them to eat 2 portions of pancakes with an extra portion of chili and cucumber salad. The man smiles affably and accepts the order. As they approach an empty table, Jiang He looks at everything around and people at another table that are eating their dinner sitting down on a chair. The young man explains that you can buy food here and he ordered it from here yesterday too. Having paid on the spot, the girl sits neatly in her place looking around. With an intern he gazes wistfully out of the window where the multicolored lights of the city are visible. Silent, the guy's blue eyes are directed at the thoughtful Jiang He in front of him. She is pulled out of her thoughts by the boss who brought them the ordered food. The girl shudders in surprise and looks at the food, then at the man. Xu Qing hands her the chopsticks and offers to start there as she thanks him with her head down, taking a sip of the drink. Apparently a mojito. Looks at the girl. He thinks that it turned out to be much more difficult to bring her to people. Jiang He chews thoughtfully, tasting a new food for himself. Xu Qing also starts eating and smiles contentedly at how delicious he is. After their plates are empty and their bellies are full, the guy asks for the bill. Having paid they go outside. It's dark outside now. King contentedly takes hold of his stomach, smiling at all. 32. A good dinner is definitely uplifting. Turns to Jiang He and offers to return home. Already at home, Xu Qing asks the girl sitting on the sofa if she believes him now. She is sitting straight, looking down. Sadly the question ignores him and turns away from him again, but the guy continues. He says that life in the modern world is not so bad. There is everything for convenience and comfort here, and there is even no ambush. It is safe here. He walks around her and sits down next to her on the sofa, claims that if they sort out her time travel here, then she will be able to enjoy what is not in her world, the same manual labor that you can earn for a carefree life. Jiang He does not change his face and taps his fingers on his knees. He only answers that he wants to go home. Xu Qing casually throws his hands behind his head and lies down looking at the ceiling, states the fact she can't. Her house is 1200 years away from them. He gets up from the back of the sofa when the girl starts talking about her getting into his world. He asks how they can deal with it. Xu Qing Qing picks up Pumpkin, who has been lying next to him all this time, and says that he cannot say for sure since he is not a scientist, but he promises to do something in the meantime. You need to get used to the current conditions and rules to keep non-origin a secret. He said he would help. Jiang He blushes a little at these words and joins his hands in a grateful gesture, enriching himself to him as a young hero. Xu Qing responds in kind and enthusiastically makes the same gesture, responding in her manner. He begins to tell something instructively again, raising his finger up, and his cat is still lying contentedly on his lap. The girl listens with interest, turning to him. Then the guy stumbles and asks where he put yesterday's paper. Jiang He calmly recalls that he crumpled it up and threw it away. On the guy's face there is awkwardness and a little shame. Jiang He stands and looks at the sheet in his hand. She asks about what will happen if she can't solve the issue with the identification card. Xu Qing clasps his hands and watches her with a calm gaze. She says that in this case she will be an unregistered citizen without the opportunity to do something. There will be no rights after all. Everything depends on the card, housing, money, food, work. She won't even be able to get on a train and go somewhere. Now there is nowhere without a card in the modern world. Jiang He understands it a little wrong and with her eyes open clarifies that if she finds a place to live and work, then an identification card will not be needed. But the guy denies and explains that without her she will not be able to do such things even as getting a cinema card and a bank card in general. Many visas will be unavailable. He sits down on the floor in front of a coffee table and clicks something on the laptop. She thinks aloud why she didn't get here 20 years earlier when everything was much simpler. Scores in the search bar, registration of unregistered citizens. Then continues. He talks to himself as if he could ask for help from the world authorities. It might work, or she might just be deprived of her freedom. To put it mildly, the situation is surprising and he really does not know what can happen to her. Jiang He hears only the basics and takes the sword hilt again, asking if he wants to hand it over to the authorities, and looking at the grave, a mute sadness and anger appear. Xu Qing of course denies it's all hypothetical, casually waves her hand, telling her it's better to read the story to have a basic idea about everything. The guy's fingers quickly click on the keyboard with the girl stands at a distance watching, clasping his hands behind his back. He asks more sadly if she is a burden to him. He feels so guilty he lowers his head. Through King without turning around replies that not really if she does not swing the sword. Immediately he hears the cat's mewing from behind and remembers that he did not feed him. She starts caressing him and touching his cheeks, talking sweetly. Jiang He watches this picture with an incomprehensible feeling, deciding to remain silent. Pulling away from Tykov, he turns to the girl. He says he can learn for now. Lowering her head, the girl agrees. Xu Qing is lying on the couch still, interrupting the entire internet. He closes his eyes wearily. Then he picks up his mobile phone and looks at the time, 10 o'clock. After unlocking it, he stumbles upon the contact of his best friend Qin Hao, a nice local policeman. Thoughtfully looks away and decides to write to him, asking questions and telling everything will be strange. So Parquet offers to meet and eat kebabs. Contact with the cat on Avenue of course willingly agrees and asks for a meeting time. Xu Qing gets up from the sofa and stretches to stretch his muscles. He's thinking of taking a shower. Coming out of the bath half wrapped in a snow white towel, he smiles contentedly. After a good shower the mood rises and you feel better, more cheerful. Then she looks at the door to Jiang He's room and wonders if she took a shower. After all, even in ancient times it was done every day. Then she remembers that she forgot to buy her pajamas, and then he realizes that he is in house with the opposite sex and runs into his room to get dressed. And then there are already pictures in my head of how she beats him for inappropriate behavior. As soon as he slams his door, Jiang He looks out for his room, assessing the situation. Then he quickly runs to the bathroom, hiding or something. She's not used to it yet. She's embarrassed. He closes the door and is already standing under the jets of hot water. A blissful smile appears on his face. Apparently she needed a shower very much. Saturday. Xu Qing shows Jiang He a geographical tablet, placing it in front of her. Explains that you can write on it and it can recognize a lot. The girl listens attentively. Parquet is just trying to write something for her when suddenly behind her on a soft sofa, a loud cat meowing is heard, distracts from class by sitting between them, shouts at the usher. Xu Qing moves away from her to feed the pumpkin. When the cat is quite eating something from the bowl, the girl asks what it is. The guy turns to her holding a bag of cat food in his hands. The girl does not understand a little and thinks that they are specially growing food for cats. A picture of packages on trees is already emerging in my head. Xu Qing explains in detail that this is processed food that he takes food from the courier and hands it to his roommate. She gives dinner and warns that she's going to meet a friend about her document. While she looks at the package with dinner, the guy says that he will teach her how to use a computer to communicate with him. Just don't let him leave the house. Jiang He looks at the burger with appetite and as if not hearing what he was saying to her, only what bites him while the girl is chewing at a cat mouse nearby demanding attention and food. She turns to him and meets the cat's cute gaze. Xu Qing immediately takes him away, forbidding him to ask because he has his own food. He shouts discontentedly in the hands of the owner. Jiang He asks with surprise if she cannot feed the cat with this, to which she gets the answer is yes. He adds that it is harmful. Horror can be seen on the girl's face, but she still starts eating her burger. At the next moment, even without the previous enthusiasm, I'm upset that he's not so attractive. Now harmful. There was a bright crescent moon in the sky illuminating where the light from the street lamps did not reach. Xu Qing moved his mouse around the screen, explained to his neighbor how he used QQ. I created an account on this social network especially for her, so that she could contact him if anything. The girl listened attentively and memorized she should already be able to use, at least that's what the guy assumed. Shaking his finger at her, he reminds her that he is not hiding in the computer. Again she translates everything into a language that she understands and tells her to present it as a martial arts technique that helps to communicate over long distances. Closing the door behind him, he hesitates in front of her for some time, persuading himself that with Jiang he will be fine. I got off the bus at the right stop. High-rise buildings seem to be pressing from all sides, but accustomed to such a feast, does not pay attention. He goes to his destination and already sees his friend, who shouts to him declaring himself. He sits down opposite Jiang He and says he didn't notice him in the dark, and his friend already takes a bottle of alcohol and pours it into glasses. Smiling, he looks at the guy opposite and invites him to alcohol. Xu Qing asks if police officers are allowed to drink alcohol, probably knowing the answer. Jiang He points to his uniform and declares that he is not on duty now. He is a civilian and can drink alcohol. The guy agrees and offers to order something to eat, ticks many dishes, and makes an order. They clink glasses and start a superficial conversation about work. Xu Qing asks a friend how his job at the station is. The same replies that expectations have collapsed. I wanted to investigate crimes to be a hero. He drinks half a glass in one gulp and continues his thought. As a result, he doesn't do anything important and just resolves conflicts of couples and quarrels between neighbors. You wouldn't envy such a job. Puts his hand on his face, painfully complaining that he had not solved a single crime. I could not even imagine that there are so many small conflicts in the world. Xu Qing smiles encouragingly and says that this means that people generally live peacefully. Isn't that a good thing? Since childhood, Jiang He dreamed of becoming a police officer. Although his height did not fit at all, barely reached the 160 centimeters mark, and I needed 170. Therefore Kukin had to disappoint his friend, kill his dream, but fortunately the minimum height was reduced, and now we were looking at how high a person can jump. This was Jiang He's dream, and subsequently he trained every day. As a result, his efforts paid off and he fulfilled his dream. Xu Qing bites his meat on the sword and listens to the interlocutor. He putting his cheek on his hand shares that it seems to him that he is going crazy. While I was waiting for my friend, I thought that some criminal was nearby whom he would tie up beautifully, but Xu Qing immediately remembers about his new acquaintance and casually waves his hand, dismissing this topic from himself and him. He leans back in his chair and looks to the side, either looking for someone or gaining courage. Finally he turns to his friend and cautiously asks if he can ask a question. Maybe he'll know something. While chewing his meat, Jiang He asks what he wants to talk about. The guy starts cautiously mentioning that everything is hypothetical, explains everything by the example of a homeless person who has lost his memory and wants to get documents to get a job, but there is no way to confirm his identity. What should it do? Jiang He with a straight face replies dryly that this is impossible. An unregistered person cannot get documents. Parkin answers that that's why he needs them in order not to be an unregistered citizen. The interlocutor turns on the working mode and asks who Xu Qing's acquaintances is without documents. The same awkwardly looks away and hastily lies that it was his distant relative who asked. The policeman doesn't believe him. He repeats again that the person who appeared out of nowhere will not be given documents. He pours alcohol into a glass while his friend looks ahead. Intently he asks if they would have dealt with an unregistered one. Jiang He looks into his. The glass ends with the fact that strange people will be asked questions then, As if he understood everything, he says that his friend is behaving strangely too. Kane puts his head on his hand in a relaxed manner and claims that there is nothing wrong with it. He won't hide a prisoner in himself and come to a policeman for advice. How can you agrees with this? He says that if they were in such a situation, they would just ask a couple of questions. During the conversation, he files his friend another drink. He says that due to memory loss, a person would be punched through the database and lists of escaped prisoners. Xu Qing in response only asks what if the person is not in the database, and his friend just boils up, asking him to stop asking such questions. The guy maliciously looks away, holding a glass in his hand as if nothing had happened. He asks what else can two guys talk about, just supports the dialogue, claims that if he had asked further then how Qin would have involved him in the case, he thinks why not, and pulls his hands forward for the handcuff. And in the eyes of excitement and fun, he says that maybe the investigation will show that he is a missing child. A friend of his just rolled to do so and calm down, explains that if anything they would check the bases of other states. Parking, of course, asks what if there is nothing there. No, and the interlocutor's answer is simple: they let him go. What else can they do if a person has not done anything illegal? Xu Qing, with determination on his face, asks if they will help a person in this case. The answer is negative. The matter is in the hands of a sword with meat. Convincingly asks his friend to stick a knife in the back of someone else. How Qin ends the dialogue with the phrase of Edmund Locard: every contact leaves footprints. Claims that this is the golden rule. Xu Qing responds with a barb so that his friend stops dreaming, because he is just a small policeman and his job is to mediate in the disputes of old ladies. How Qin is all on fire and angry at such a phrase, tightly clutching the sword in his hands. Her remembering something, he appears in front of her and with his chest proudly raised, asks why she did not call him young master, clasps his hands together and exhales resolutely, staring at her with his bright eyes. Then Thor is more simply interested in whether he is considered really young, a warrior, or maybe a man or someone else. The girl just looks at him blankly, not knowing how to react, tilts his head sideways and slowly corrects in a questioning tone, thanking him already as a young warrior. The guy closes his eyes and confidently beats his fist on the palm in front of him, content with the way she addressed him. Jiang He looks at him gloomily with an emotion unknown to her, and he's having fun with her, who doesn't understand that this feeling is called drooling. Offers to start eating. Xu Qing looks surprised from the side how aggressive the girl began to eat, quickly emptying the saucer. As a result, he puts rice in his mouth and blissfully and calmly chews with her after their plates are empty. Xu Qing says that he bought clothes but does not know their size, so he judges by height it should fit. Awkwardly hands her a dress on hanger and sneakers in a box, adding that they should be much more comfortable than the straw sandals she came in. While he turns away further into the bag, the girl is incomprehensibly holding a bra in her hands, and Phil King is embarrassed by this, and faster he shoves her a bag with all her clothes. She says that if she doesn't understand how to put it on, she will show her a video. Jiang He again does not understand the new word. The young man ignores her question and in the end gives her a box of underwear, and not even looking in her direction, blushes a little and just gives it all to her to study herself, let her handle it herself. The girl, as usual, does not understand either what he is holding out to her or why he behaves like this. The last one hands her books on history and science fiction. She doesn't know if it's a good at in plain Chinese, but that's what she'll find out. She thinks it would be worth teaching her how to use a computer so that she can easily learn everything. He notices out of the corner of his eye that Jiang He is yawning. No wonder she was tired. After all, he didn't sleep well that night either. Turns to her sitting at the computer desk and asks if she has any questions, offers to sleep, but the girl ignores it. He is interested in what status Xu Qing has in this world. It is unlikely that she will understand that he is a graduate who will soon become a social worker, but for now he is unemployed, he thinks, scratching his chin. Therefore he gives an example that is more understandable for her case. Is like after an imperial exam but without a job. The girl assumes that he is a rich child but cuts him off because his past is not rich and he does not want to be an official. Jiang He thinks about it and understands it in his own way. Maybe he's from a feudal family. If he turns back to the book that Xu Qing bought her and sees a page with familiar people, more precisely in familiar clothes, tears come to my eyes. The homesickness for the motherland and the people from there again brings. She asks how she can get back, but the answer doesn't change. He doesn't know. How did she get here in the first place? Jiang He says that she chased a thief in a rainy forest, then I got lost and wandering around came across an unfamiliar small house. Xu Qing immediately notes that there are no forests in the area, and it seems strange to him. He